on, baby.
Enjoy this great game.
One of the most exciting elements of being a Major League Baseball fan is the MLB draft, which allows fans and the media to hype up some of the most talented young baseball players in the country as teams select them to enter into their organization. Oftentimes, even at this early stage, elite talent can be identified. We use terms like can't miss prospect and insanely high ceiling with certain names, and sometimes those labels turn out completely right, and a player like Chipper Jones or Ken Griffey Jr. gets selected first overall in the draft and go on to have Hall of Fame careers. However, when it comes to drafting young high school or college players who still have to go through years of minor league development to prove themselves, there's never a guarantee, and many times even the most supposed can't-miss prospect for some reason or another never ends up becoming the player they were supposed to, and sometimes they don't even make it to the major leagues. In today's video, we're going to count down the 10 biggest draft busts in MLB history. And by the way, one player who did not make my top 10 list is Matt Bush, who has been considered a huge bust as a #1 overall pick who then had massive off-the-field issues that derailed his career. However, because he seems to have gotten his life together and made it to the big leagues, and as of 2022, he is still pitching in the big leagues at age 36. He didn't quite make my top 10 as I look at his career more like a success story than a bust. So let's get started with my list, and it starts at number 10, Todd Van Poppel, pitcher. Back in the late 80s, when I first became a huge fan of baseball, there wasn't much access to information on draft picks, and for the most part, the average fan, especially one who was 9 years old like myself, had no knowledge about the newest draft picks. However, one name was so hot that even I knew all about Todd Van Poppel, an absolute phenom who had a 0.97 ERA and 170 strikeouts in his final high school season out of Arlington, Texas. After the Oakland A's drafted him in the first round, he even got a 7-Eleven Superstar 3D coin, usually only made for the top superstars of the game. My friends who were A's fans bragged about him and how the A's, after their '89 championship, were destined to start a huge dynasty with Van Poppel leading the way. However, Van Poppel and his agent must have been overconfident as they had the A's structure the contract as an MLB deal from the onset, allowing only a certain amount of minor league appearances. For this reason, the A's had to accelerate his path through the minors, promoting him to Double-A after only 8 appearances in Single-A. And then after just 24 appearances in Double-A, and despite a 6-13 record, he was brought up to the big leagues, where he gave up 5 runs and 7 hits in his only start in 1991. He was then injured for much of '92 and ended up spending 5 years with the A's, recording a 5.75 ERA. Eventually, he went to Detroit, where he had an atrocious 11.39 ERA over 9 starts in 1996. Somehow, he was still able to stick around the big leagues for a while anyway, pitching out of the bullpen for the Cubs, Rangers, Reds, and Pirates, and retired after an 11-year career, which is why he isn't higher on this list. Nevertheless, the hype never got close to his actual performance, and as such, Todd Van Poppel is number 10 on my list of the top MLB busts of all time. Number 9, Brian Bullington, pitcher. In the 2002 MLB draft, the Pittsburgh Pirates had the first overall selection and took what looked like a safe pick, a 21-year-old college, 6'5", 225-pound pitcher out of Ball State, who set a university record for strikeouts and led his league in victories and ERA that season. His name was Brian Bullington. The only risk might be that Ball State did not compete as one of the Power 5 conferences, so the competition was a bit lighter than other schools. Nevertheless, it felt like perhaps a safer pick than high school kids like Zach Greinke or Prince Fielder. Of course, either of them would have worked out much better. Still, major league teams were aware of Bullington since his high school days when he went 15-0 in 1999 and pitched a one-hitter in the state finals. The Royals took him in the 37th round, but he did not sign. By 2002, he was considered one of the best collegiate pitchers in the country. After the Pirates took him first overall, he was immediately placed in the top 100 MLB prospects list before even appearing in a minor league game. Then he moved up that list quickly after going 5-1 with a 1.39 ERA for the Class A Hickory Crawdads. By 2004, he was a Double-A All-Star and even pitched a scoreless inning in the Futures game at Minute Maid Park. Then, after pitching well in AAA, Bullington was finally promoted, but only pitched in one MLB game before damaging his shoulder. He needed major surgery and missed the entire 2006 season. In 2007, he had a decent comeback season in AAA with an 11-9 record and an ERA of exactly 4, but then he went 0-3 with a 5.29 ERA during his September call-up. He was never able to figure it out at the big league level and ended up pitching for the Indians, Blue Jays, and Royals, finishing his career with exactly one major league win. Number 8, Brooks Kieschnick, outfield and pitcher. Long before Shohei Ohtani, there was a young up-and-coming player named Brooks Kieschnick, who baseball fans all believed was the next Babe Ruth, a player who could both hit and pitch at an elite level. He's the only player to have won the Dick Howser Trophy given to the best college baseball player of the year twice. For the Texas Longhorns, Kieschnick hit .360, crushing 43 home runs and driving in 215 runs. As a pitcher, he went 34-8 with a 3.05 ERA, earning a reputation as a legitimate two-way player who could be drafted either as a position player or pitcher or both. In the '93 draft, he was taken 10th overall by the Cubs, who decided that his offense, especially his power, was more important than his pitching and hence used him as a position player. The decision seemed like the right one as he shuttled through the minor leagues, hitting for power and average every step along the way. In 1995, he hit .295 with 23 home runs and a .370 on-base percentage for the AAA Iowa Cubs. He was called up to the big leagues in 1996 and had an amazing debut performance, hitting his first big league home run, and he went 10 for 29 during that call-up, good enough for a .345 batting average. All signs pointed towards Kieschnick being a regular for the 1997 Cubs. However, he was reportedly stunned and dejected after being sent back to minor league camp during the last week of '97 spring training. He was eventually called up but hit just .200. The next year, the Devil Rays claimed him in their expansion draft but never promoted him to the big leagues. He ended up signing with the Reds in 2000 but went 0 for 12 with 5 strikeouts. Kieschnick did have a bit of a resurgence with the Brewers in 2003 and 2004 as he took up pitching again and was a decent arm coming out of the bullpen. And he also seemed to hit better in this role with a .300 average in 2003 with 7 bombs. Unfortunately, however, he never played an MLB game after 2004. Number 7, Danny Goodwin, catcher, first base, DH. At number 7, we have a player who was so good as a young amateur ball player that he was selected first overall twice. First out of high school, the Chicago Cubs took Goodwin with the first overall selection in 1971. He decided not to sign and attended Southern University and A&M in Baton Rouge. There, he was a 3-time All-American and 1975 College Player of the Year. He hit .408 with an incredible .543 on-base percentage and 1,271 OPS. Goodwin was considered the best player again in the '75 draft, and this time it was the California Angels who had the first overall pick. They took Goodwin and offered at the time a record $150,000 bonus. Sadly, the Angels were not going to be patient with Goodwin's development, and they assigned him directly to AA, where he hit .275 with 2 home runs, and then after just 46 games, they promoted him to the big leagues. After this rush to Major League Baseball, he went 1 for 10 with 5 strikeouts. Perhaps realizing their mistake, the Angels sent him all the way back to A-ball in 1976, a move that could not have helped his confidence. Nevertheless, he hit .306 between AA and AAA in 1977, and for the first time playing AAA ball, he hit .305 with 10 home runs in 77 games. Then, nearly 2 years after his first promotion to the big leagues, he finally made it back, but hit just .209 in 91 at-bats with a single home run. The Angels also, despite drafting him as a catcher, never allowed him to wear a glove. He only pinch hit or played DH. He never worked out with the Angels and was finally shipped to Minnesota, where he played in a part-time role as a first baseman, pinch hitter, and DH. He played in the A's organization from 1982 to 1985, only getting 52 big league at-bats and hitting .212. For a 2-time #1 overall draft pick, he was a monumental bust, but a lot of the blame goes to the Angels, who never gave him a proper minor league development. Number 6, David CLYDE, pitcher. In an even more extreme example of a team rushing a young prospect, we have David CLYDE. Clyde was a high school phenom who was billed as the next Sandy Koufax. In 1973, he was the consensus best player available, and the Texas Rangers, who had the first overall pick after losing 100 games in 1972, snagged him and gave him a record $125,000 bonus. Clyde signed with Texas and said his goal was to become the greatest pitcher ever. Unfortunately, Texas Rangers owner Bob Short may have not had Clyde's best interest in mind. It was already agreed that Clyde would skip the minors and go straight to the big leagues for his first 2 starts, before then heading to the minors for some proper development. However, after Short noticed that Clyde's first start resulted in the first sellout in Arlington Stadium history, he forced the team to keep him on the big league roster. Clyde ended his rookie year with a 4-8 record and 5.01 ERA, never having pitched an inning in the minor leagues. The next year, Billy Martin was hired as manager and fought with the GM over Clyde's future. Martin knew he was not big league ready. Still, he stayed. And in 1974, Clyde went 3-9 with a 4.38 ERA. Considering he went straight from high school to the big leagues, his numbers were not even that terrible. And had he been given a normal minor league career, who knows what would have become of David Clyde. But unfortunately, by the time he was finally sent to the minor leagues in 1975, he had already injured his shoulder and was never the same. After surgery, he bounced around the minors with a few MLB opportunities here and there, but he never found any consistency and retired with an 18-33 record and 4.63 ERA. Number 5, Sean Abner, outfielder. It was the 1984 draft and the Mets were looking to build the best outfield in baseball. They already had Darryl Strawberry, and Billy Beane was getting ready to be promoted. They identified Sean Abner as an all-around, can't-miss prospect. So the Mets took him as the number 1 overall pick ahead of USC star Mark McGwire. He hit for a decent average in the minors, but his power was lacking. The Mets decided to include him in a blockbuster 8-man deal that sent Kevin Mitchell to the Padres for Kevin McReynolds. In 1987, Abner made his big league debut for the Padres. Unfortunately, he was just never that great, hitting 181 in 1988 and 187 in '89. He didn't even offer any power to offset the low batting average. He played his last year in the big leagues in 1992, hitting 279 with a home run. Injuries prevented him from making it back to the big leagues after that. In 2020, Abner was sentenced to 4.5 to 23 months in prison for animal cruelty after leaving his dog at home for over a month, resulting in the dog passing away. Apparently, he didn't ask anyone to care for the dog while he was gone. Number 4, Steve Chilcott, catcher. Unfortunately for the New York Mets, Sean Abner isn't even the worst number 1 overall pick as far as MLB production. The 1966 MLB draft produced some amazing MLB players such as Ron Cey, Steve Garvey, and Charlie Huff. In fact, 3 of the top 4 picks ended up being MLB All-Stars, and one of them, the 2nd overall pick, went to the Hall of Fame. His name was Reggie Jackson. However, with the number 1 overall pick, the New York Mets took Steve Chilcott out of Antelope Valley High School in Lancaster, California. He was a left-handed hitting catcher with a quick bat and extraordinary potential. He showed some of that potential in the minors. He was hitting .290 in single A with a .365 on-base percentage and 45 runs driven in after 79 games when he dove back into first base on a pickoff attempt. It was a normal play we see hundreds of times per season, but on this particular play, Chilcott jammed his hand into the base and dislocated his shoulder, ending his season. The next year he came back but hit just 189 for Visalia. Chilcott had injury issues for the rest of his career and never made it to the big leagues. After retirement, he became a firefighter and later a full-time contractor, constructing and remodeling homes. If not for that injury diving back into first base, who knows what could have become of Steve Chilcott. Number 3, Al Chambers, DH, outfield. The Mariners have had the number 1 overall pick 4 times in their franchise history. Twice, they hit the jackpot, once with Ken Griffey Jr. and once with A-Rod. Another time, they picked pitcher Mike Moore, who had a solid 14-year career. But in 1979, the M's were not so lucky. After losing 104 games and finishing dead last in 78, the Mariners were awarded the first overall pick in 1979, and with it, they selected an outfielder out of John Harris High School in Pennsylvania named Al Chambers. Chambers seemed to have all the tools. At 6'4", 217 pounds, he had the potential to become an absolute monster at the big league level. In 1989, with the San Jose Missions, he hit .301 with a .388 on base. The following year, he started to show his power with 20 home runs for the AA Lynn Sailors. Then in AAA, he had a huge year, hitting .331 with 75 RBIs in just 99 games for the Salt Lake City Gulls. And when he finally got his opportunity in the big leagues, he drove in 4 runs in his major league debut. However, something didn't feel right. The veterans on that team didn't take me under their wing, he said. It was a tough situation for me. I talked to other rookies in the league who told me how the veterans showed them the ropes, but that never happened in Seattle. He ended up hitting just .209 for the Mariners and 67 at-bats in 1983 and was devastated when they sent him back to the minors. In '84, he hit .225. In '85, he was only given 4 big league at-bats despite hitting .308 with a .402 on-base percentage in AAA. He didn't have any major injuries or off-field issues. It just wasn't meant to be for Chambers. You only get so many breaks, he said. Chambers went on to work the swing shift at the Hershey Foods factory in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Number 2, Adam Johnson, pitcher. The Minnesota Twins first selected Adam Johnson out of high school in 1997, but he chose to attend college instead. He set a Cal State Fullerton record with 365 strikeouts and was named Big West Conference Pitcher of the Year. In 2000, he struck out 166 batters in 119 innings. In that year's MLB draft, the Twins took him again, but this time with the 2nd overall pick. Only Adrian Gonzalez was taken higher. Johnson's strikeout stuff translated to the pros immediately as he struck out 92 batters in 69 single-A innings for the Fort Myers Miracle, maintaining a 2.47 ERA. The next season, in 2001, he was pushed through the minors quickly and made his big league debut. Unfortunately, that's where his success ended, as he gave up 23 runs in 25 innings while only striking out 17. In 2002, he failed to make the team out of spring training, and when given his assignment papers, according to former Twins player Michael KIESCHNIck, he crumbled them up and stormed out of the manager's office. He only pitched in 2 more MLB games, although he hung around the minors and independent leagues through 2009. Number 1, Bryan Taylor, pitcher. And number 1 is by far the consensus best player available in the 1991 MLB draft, Bryan Taylor. At that time, Taylor was considered possibly the best high school pitcher of all time. The Yankees took him 1st overall and eventually signed him for an insane $1.55 million. Taylor hired Scott Boras as an advisor. Boras said in 2006 that Bryan Taylor, to this day, is still the best high school pitcher I've ever seen in my life. He had a fastball that touched triple digits and struck out 213 out of 264 batters while walking only 28. No one could touch him. In his first year in the minors, 1992, he pitched well, striking out 187 in 161 innings with a 2.57 ERA at High A Fort Lauderdale. The next season in AA, he went 13-7 with a 3.48 ERA. Nothing insanely impressive, but certainly good enough to expect that he would make his big league debut in 1994. But then, on December 13th during the offseason, there was the fist fight heard around the baseball world. Bryan Taylor, defending his brother, got into a fight, and during this fight, he severely injured his shoulder. He needed major surgery and missed the entire 1994 season. One doctor said it was the worst shoulder injury he'd ever seen. By the time he returned, Taylor had lost 8 miles per hour off his fastball and completely lost his command. The Yankees were forced to keep him in single-A while he tried to work it out, but his numbers were absolutely atrocious. He went 0-5 with an 18.73 ERA and walked a ridiculous 43 batters in 16 innings. The Yankees eventually had no choice but to release him. After baseball, he worked for UPS, then as a beer distributor. Later, he was arrested and charged with cocaine trafficking and spent over 3 years in prison. It's insane to think what would have been if he had never gotten into that fist fight, as Taylor was on the fast track to the big leagues with some of the best stuff any pitching prospect had ever had. Thank you so much for checking out today's video on the top 10 draft busts of all time. And if you'd like to give more examples in the comment section of anyone I missed, I'd be happy to do a follow-up, more draft busts, for an upcoming video. Thank you all so much. Please hit that thumbs up, and I would appreciate it if you could also subscribe to the channel. Have a wonderful day, and we will talk to you next time.